Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. If you have any questions throughout the session, if you're joining us on Zoom, just look at the top of the bottom of your screen. Wherever your Zoom controls are, you should see a little button that says Q&A. Click on that, type in your question, hit submit, and I'll get to those at the end of the session. If you're joining us on YouTube, just feel free to use the live chat function. If you're watching it live, just add it to the chat. Otherwise, if you're watching it after the fact, of course, you can always comment on it as well. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's national diagnostic technical trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep with Snap-on, so I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so worked in a dealership, and I guess over time, became the default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up with the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bag. And before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is on with our OEM specific training classes we've started this year. And today it is Ford. So we're going through every quarter. We will be going every other week through this OEM specific training. And it's going to be what is unique to this particular brand, scan tool wise, what's unique about some common failures that you might not find on other vehicles. Because, you know, when I worked at the dealership, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of very common things that would be common for a Subaru, but it wouldn't be common for a Ford or a Chevy or an Audi or what have you. So that's kind of what we're trying to gear in on here, is what are the unique things that you might run into if you haven't really worked on these vehicles before in the past. Maybe you only work on one brand, maybe you only work on certain brands. So we're trying to give you as much of this material as we can in, let's say, half an hour that we have. So let's start off with the history. Now, back in the day, turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, I think if you go and look at the history of the automobile in the United States, there's tons of different companies that came up. There's tons of different companies around. But the one that seemed to nail it down the best or the most or make it the least expensive, I think is what it boils down to, brought the vehicles to the masses, was Ford. So, of course, it started as the Henry Ford Motor Company in 1901. That's when it was originally started. Interestingly enough, changed to the Cadillac Motor Company in 1902. And then in 1903, it became the Ford Motor Company. Henry bought a factory. And another interesting fact about that is the Dodge brothers. May have heard of them, right? Started Dodge. The Dodge brothers were early investors in his company. And then he came out with the multiple models of vehicle, and of course the most successful one back then at the beginning was the Model T, and that came out in 1908. And if you see right here, 650 bucks. Boy, I wish I could buy a car for 650 bucks nowadays. That's new. Put it that way. You can, of course, buy a car for 650 bucks, but you might not go down the road very well. And then another, of course, thing that they're known for is that in 1913, Ford opened the first moving assembly line, which allowed more vehicles to be built in a day, which, of course, allowed them to keep costs down, which allowed them to sell them for less. They would make up for the lack of profit, I guess you would say, per unit. They would make up for that in volume. So that was kind of their whole mantra back then, was let's make it the assembly line piece by piece. And he was the big proponent of the 40-hour work week too, and it wasn't really out of the goodness of his heart either. It was more of, if I offer these extra incentives, people are going to want to come work for me instead of work for one of the other automakers that were around at the time. So 40-hour work week can be contributed back to then as well. Now, in 2018, this was also kind of interesting. This wasn't too long ago, right? 5-6 years ago. In 2018, Ford announced it will no longer sell cars in the North American market, focusing on trucks, SUVs, and EVs. So, of course, they are still making the Mustang EV. But that's really it. No more Focus, no more Fusion in the States anyways. They do still sell cars globally, UK, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, anywhere but North America, pretty much. They are still selling cars globally because usually they're at a smaller size vehicle over there, Europe especially. So they are still selling them globally, but just over here, it's like no new car models over here. So speaking of vehicle models, we have, of course, market research that we do all the time, and top models that came up, the top 10 models of Ford as far as sales, and this is 10 years, so 2013 through 2023. This is total sales, and I think if you watch the commercials or hear anything about this, you'll understand that yes, the Ford F-Series is the #1 selling vehicle in this is North America, of course, but globally, Ford overall has quite the large sales volume, of course. So #1 is Ford F-Series, #2, trailing by a lot, like 6 million, a lot, is the Ford Escape, and then the Explorer, all the way down to the E-Series, which of course would be the large van, and you're getting down to a little over 500,000 over 10 years. So that's like 60,000 a year on average for that. So you can see there, that's why they're focusing on trucks and SUVs. Truck, SUV, 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 right? Van. So most of these top 10 in sales are the trucks. And of course, they are a higher profit margin for them. So it would make sense if you're in business that you'd want to sell the stuff with the highest profit, right? So I picked a few representative vehicles and kind of where the high watermark was for sales in that 10-year span. So 2018 F-150 is one of them. Now, if we talk about a 2018, that was the 13th generation of the F-150. And I think they even counted back to, like, say, the F-100. And this was the generation where they started with the all aluminum body. Pretty much anything on that vehicle is aluminum except for the firewall on that vehicle. So obviously saves weight. And also in 2018, it was a mid-generation refresh, so they changed a little bit, grill, headlights, that sort of thing. Was offered with a 2.7-liter EcoBoost, 3-liter Power Stroke diesel, which I believe was new for that year as well. 3.3-liter naturally aspirated, 3.5 EcoBoost, and a 5-liter naturally aspirated engine. So 6-speed or 10-speed automatic transmissions were available depending on what you had for an engine there. All right, next one is a 2016 Escape. So that was pretty much the high water mark in sales for them in 2016. It was the third generation of this platform, offered with a 1.6-liter EcoBoost, a 2-liter EcoBoost, and the 2.5-liter naturally aspirated, that Duratec engine they used in everything for so many years throughout the 2000s and 2015 teens. Available with a 6-speed transmission, automatic. Also known globally as a Ford Kuga. So if you're watching from overseas, if you see a Kuga, Kuga, then that's the same vehicle underneath. Just we call it an Escape over here. And then another one's a 2018 Focus. So this was the last year in North America that was available. Because remember, they announced in 2018 that they were stopping making automobiles. So it was the third generation Focus, offered with a 1-liter EcoBoost, a 2-liter EcoBoost, a 2.3-liter EcoBoost, a 2-liter naturally aspirated, and also available as an electric car as well with a 33.5 kilowatt-hour electric drivetrain. So 6-speed automatic transmission, unless it was the electric, of course. And like I said, it was the last year available in North America, still readily available throughout the world, but last year in North America. How about some common issues that come up with Fords? Well, if you've worked on Fords or heard anything about Fords, misfires, and more misfires. A lot of misfires out there. That's why we have multitude of tests in the tool for Ford in order to help you diagnose misfires, just because they were so prevalent, so many issues with those. Diesel V8s as well, which is pretty popular engine, diesel V8. Injector issues with those, so there's actually tests in there for that as well, for injector issues. Timing and VVT issues, you see a lot of those P0011, 0012 codes in there as well. Timing chain problems, things like that. So here's an example for like misfires, testing misfires, right? So this is for a TSB that Ford released. So what happened was, if you work at a dealership, much like I did, and much like many of you probably do or did as well, when you replace a part under warranty, usually the manufacturer wants you to send it back because they want to test it. They want to see, is there a common failure here? Is there a problem? Is there a revision to a part that we need to make, something of that nature? So you would need to send it back. So Ford was getting all these coils back for misfire problems, and they're testing them, and sure enough, a majority of them are testing good. So they said, "Hey, this is not right because we're paying to replace these coils under warranty, and there's nothing wrong with them." So they said, "All right, so let's come up with a test. So you need to do this test, and this is on a Ford lab scope, and any lab scope would be able to do the same test." And they said, "All right, you're going to test this, and you're going to need to give us a screenshot or a printout of what the pattern looks like on that coil." So there's a good coil, there's one that's going to fail, and there's one that's completely failed. Pretty well cut and dry. Makes it nice and easy for you if you are trying to diagnose a misfire on those Ford coils. This is in our tool as well, inside the guided component test function in the tool. It's called a Ford RFI high output test. It's in pretty much any Ford with coil on plug ignition. So and there's your TSB number there if you want to look it up for yourself. So let's look at common codes. So of course we have data from the scan tools, of course. So we have the top like 3,800 codes that came up in North America, and I just filtered it down to Ford, and these are the top 10 codes for Fords. Now you'll see there's a lot of commonality here in between the engine. A lot of them is that 543 valve. They call that the Triton engine. And if you've heard anything about that, fair number of problems on those. And the number one code is on an F-150 with the 3 valve, P0012. So that's intake cam position timing. And then we have on another 5.4 here, intake cam position, cam position, cam position, cam position, cam position. So like I said, a lot of cam and VVT issues on those vehicles. And then we have injector on the diesel, on the Power Stroke, and then on the Power Stroke here, ICP sensor. So that's injector control pressure. So we can see a lot of injector problems on those, and there are specific tests on those as well for that. So a lot of timing problems, a lot of cam problems. We got lean in here as well. So that's your top 10 codes that people have clicked on in our tool when they're scanning the vehicle. So let's look at a little case study for an 08 Ford F-150 with that 5.4 Triton engine back in the day. So this is courtesy of one of our diagnostic reps up in Canada, Paul McCallum. And the problem is the truck was brought in a quality transmission in Sudbury, Ontario. So it's a transmission shop. And the customer complaint is when leaving an intersection from a dead stop, the truck would shudder and violently vibrate throughout the drivetrain. So the customer thought that the transmission was falling out, or they had some sort of an issue with the transmission. That's why they brought it to a transmission shop. Right? Shop owner ran the initial scanner diagnostic, did a pre-scan on the vehicle. No codes in the transmission. However, a PL300 random misfire in the engine and a P0022 intake camshaft timing over retarded code. All right, so they went in under functional tests and they wanted to do some testing on this. And now this is on an older vehicle, older software on a Veris that they did this. So it is no longer called a cylinder contribution test. It is a power balance test, but the cylinder contribution test is what we had back in the day. And it's used to identify cylinders with severe misfires by measuring individual contributions. Individual cylinder values with negative numbers are going to be lower contributors. So they took it and they ran it. And before it starts, of course, you're going to get 0. But then as it was running, cylinder 3 had an intermittent miss, and you can see it pumped up to negative 36. So that is counting, counts the number of misfires. So we can see negative 36 on cylinder 3. So they went and diagnosed cylinder 3, come to find out it was a coil. Easy enough. That's, like we said, fairly common on those vehicles anyway. So they tested the coil, replaced it. But they still had a P0022 code on there as well. So comprehensive component monitor monitors the variable cam timing position for over-retarded camshaft timing. Test fails when the cam timing exceeds the maximum calibrated value or remains in a retarded position. Now, of course, those are the cam gears on the front. Oil pressure pushes them back and forth, advance and retard the timing. Possible causes of camshaft timing improperly set, continuous oil flow to the VCT piston chamber, VCT solenoid valve stuck open, cam advanced binding. Also, DTC is a functional test of the VCT unit. Diagnose any base engine concerns related to the engine oil pressure or engine timing first. For the workshop manual for that. So they took a road test. They observed in the data stream the VCT solenoid. So they wanted to take a look at the data. This controls the variable valve timing, which was sluggish and sometimes froze at 0. So it wasn't operating as it should. So the next thing they wanted to do is they wanted to swap the solenoids. So you can just, they're same left and right. So they just wanted to swap them left to right to see if it followed back and forth. Also a few little diagnostic aids in here as well. So let's see, 4-cylinder and V8 engines use a cam 4+1 tooth trigger wheel, V6 engines 3+1. Extra tooth place between equally spaced teeth. Let's see, it just gives you a couple of different conditions in here and what it may be and how it works. So there was a Ford tip in there that helped them fix the truck. So we need constant oil pressure between 24 and 28 psi is required to properly operate those solenoids. It was recommended to get an oil gauge on the truck. Oil pressure on the truck when running was around 14 psi and occasionally dropped to 0. So upon mechanical inspection, they discovered a leaking cam seal was causing oil pressure to drop. So it was trying to build up behind the cam seal. Cam seal was leaking, and the oil was leaking back into the chain, the front cover, because it was it's an oil bath on the chain. It's on the front of the engine, and it just leaked back into the cover. So they discovered it was a bad cam seal, and then that solved the problem. Now, if they had looked at the diagnostic aids here in the troubleshooter, that ended up proving right. Engine concerns related to engine oil pressure at first would cause that. So that's just kind of an interesting one. It wasn't, the misfire was a coil. That's pretty common, as we all know. But then the variable cam timing, either it's low oil pressure, contaminated oil, a problem with the system. In this case, it was low oil pressure caused by a bad cam seal letting the oil. All right, let's talk about a few different scan tool functions that we'll find that are unique to Ford itself, OEM specific. So engine-related tests, there are quite a few for misfires just because of the fact that there's a lot of misfires. So things like power balance tests would help with that. That's shown on the screen here where you get the little histograph of the cylinders. Relative compression test, that can help us with that. It's an automated relative compression test initiated by the scan tool. Relative injector flow test, that can also help in your misfire diagnosis. Misfire monitor neutral profile correction, which is after you diagnose a misfire and fix it. You need to reset the misfire monitor. Also, there's a new misfire test in there on certain vehicles that will allow you to, it kind of walks you through the whole steps of the test that are available there. And then also PMI. So PMI stands for Programmable Module Installation. What that does is when I replace a module on some Ford vehicles, certain modules, you need to take the, basically take a file, the configuration information off the old module and put it on the new module and swap it. So the scan tool can do this. It's just a copy and paste. It's not a flash or anything. It's just simply copying it and pasting it back into the module. Now we've slowly been adding this, I wouldn't say slowly, but we've been adding it progressively across different vehicles over the last probably 2 years or so. So we started off on some of the bigger rocks, the more common things, and now we're bringing it down to other modules on the vehicle as well. With the next software update in April, we're actually going to have a large number of PMI, a large number of vehicles or modules covered under PMI going into that next software update. So if you don't see it now, you may very well see it very soon with the next software update as well. Some transmission related tests that are kind of unique to Ford as well. So transmission characterization and solenoid identification. I know when you do transmission work, you need to enter in some of this information, and that's not there, but you can identify what is in the vehicle already without having to pull it out. So what kind of transmission, what's the strategy, what's the identification number, and then it gives you the different band numbers, which you need in order to order the proper solenoid for the transmission. So that can help doing that with the scan tool without having to tear it down. And then body related tests. So they have a really unique battery monitoring system in Ford. A lot of manufacturers have battery monitoring systems, but in the Ford, What happens is if you say you're in the driveway, you got the key on, you're listening to the radio, cleaning out the vehicle or something like that, and the battery voltage gets to a certain level, it'll start shutting things off and it won't restart them for 8 hours. It has to do like kind of this cool down reset. So there's actually a function in the scan tool where you can go in and reset that and force it to reset itself. So the function resets the battery monitoring system, perform it following when the battery is replaced, when the body control module is replaced, or when instructed by the workshop manual, which would be when some of the modules have shut off. Also, wiper motor module calibration is another one. And if you were here at the very beginning and you saw the pre-roll video there on a Ford Focus, I think probably a couple other Fords as well, but Focus for sure. When you do any work with the wiper arms, wiper motors, since they don't have a linkage or individually, addressable motors, you have to you have to recalibrate where the wiper arms are. So it tells you when you're in calibration mode what you need to do. You need to pull the wiper arm up between the wiper arm and the edge of the windshield. It needs to be 50 millimeters, and that tells you how to do it. And then there we are with our measuring tape, just measuring 50 millimeters to the side of the rubber there. So this sets them to their max motion position, so we're not over extending off the side of the windshield. So that's kind of unique to Ford as well. A lot of people, I asked the question, what can you do that doesn't need a scan tool? And some people say, "Oh, I can work on the wipers." Well, not on that Ford, you can't for sure. There's other vehicles too, but I just thought that was another kind of unique one to Ford. So let's take a look on the tool at some of these things and see what we can see. So first one I'll do is the F-150. Go in here, 18 F-150. I just took our representative cars we talked about earlier in the presentation, and we'll just look through them. So F-Series, there we go. All right, and then we'll go into engine and see what we can do here. And we'll do functional tests and special functions. So in special functions, you'll see we also have evap tests, automated evap tests. So evap gross leak test, cold soak time bypass. So if there's a time that needs to be met for the evap test to run, we can bypass that as well. Misfire monitor neutral profile correction, talked about that. After I do any work on the timing or anything like that, I have to reset that. Power balance test, relative compression test. So that power balance test, what that's going to do, park in neutral, don't use excessive RPM or rapid RPM changes. Make sure parking brake is engaged. We go through here, and it's going to give us that histograph that we talked about. Now, on a normally running vehicle, this should be relatively flat. Should be pretty close to flat. We probably won't see a positive. Usually we'll see a negative. So whatever cylinder is running and not contributing to the rest of the vehicle, that's where you're going to get your negative down. Also in this, I can go in and switch off individual injectors. Now, of course, demo mode, this isn't going to show us, but we can turn individual injectors off and see how does it affect. Does it go down? And depending on whether or not that injector is actually working or not, will show us what's going on there. So you can turn on and off individual injectors. I think you can do multiples as well. It's just one at a time, and then enable. So that'll help you with misfire diagnosis to at least tell whether or not it's the actual fuel injector or not. So that's pretty helpful. Relative compression test, same type of thing. So it actually runs you through, tells you how to set up the vehicle, and then it cranks it over, and then it tells relative by crank speed whether or not I have an issue with compression in there as well using the starter. All right. How about the BCM down here? Functional tests. And in here, we also have the battery management system reset. So that is the reset after the battery's replaced or the BCM is replaced, or if I have to do it for some other reason, you go in here and it just it'll just reset it. Of course, in this case, it senses RPM in the demo mode, so it wouldn't work, but we'd be able to do that. Also, keyless entry keypads. So that's fairly unique to Ford as well. So I can go in there and let's see, I can retrieve the code, I can program in a code, and then I can erase the code as well on the keypad on the phone. So that's helpful, especially if you got a used vehicle in there. All right, let's look at some real world information, some SureTrack. So we have, all right, so it's defaulted to a 5-liter V8. And you see it's 66,278 repairs. That's based on our 2.75 now. 2.75 billion real world repair events. 66,000 times we caught a 2018 Ford F-150 with a 5-liter. So that's pretty normal to get pads and rotors and wheels and stuff. Battery, I guess. TPMS seems kind of high, but maybe they just have some issues with it. Spark plugs, fairly high, and that will bear out over here on our common codes. Misfire, 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 misfire. Right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So half of the top 10 codes were misfires. And then we get cam position, right? Cam sensor, cat efficiency, cam sensor. So a lot of cam issues with the variable cam time. Engine doesn't start. Engine runs rough. Noise heard. And then over here, common lookups is what people have been searching for. So things like the timing chain, cabin air filter. Cabin air filter is usually pretty high up because people want to replace them and they need to find out where it is. Timing chain for the timing problems. Firing order for misfire problems. So that's on the 5-liter. Let's change engines here because this is vehicle engine specific. So we'll go to the 2.7. 48,000 repairs, slightly less common. Pads and rotors, once again, that's not going to change. Ignition coil is way further down on the list. Number 1 code on this one is cat efficiency. And misfire, 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 misfire. So the majority of these are misfire problems on this EcoBoost as well. Exhaust pressure sensor, oxygen sensor. So a lot of common issues there. Mostly misfires, noises. Engine runs rough. Once again, cabin filter, that's not going to change. Drainage fluid, firing order. So we can see once again a lot of misfires. Let's switch to the 3-liter. That's the diesel. That is the least common engine out of all of these. You can see 4,000 repairs. And of course, being a diesel, we're going to have a lot of different issues with this. So pads and rotors, of course, as usual. Tire pressure monitor stuff. Ambient air temperature sensor. NOx sensor, right, for the after treatment. Turbocharger. There's a misfire down there. Wheel speed sensor, right? So now we're getting down to the onesies and twosies as well. Number 1 symptom, AC anob, right? Engine doesn't start. So you can tell by different engines, different unique issues with this. And if you have access to this information, which if you have an up-to-date scan tool, you do have access to this. Even if you don't have ShopKey, you at least have access to these top 10 lists because you do have access to this. 22,000 on the 3.3-liter. Once again, misfire, misfire, a bunch of misfires. Once again, a lot of misfire problems with that. And then let's go to, what's the other? 3.5, the other EcoBoosts. All right, so 42,000 repairs on that. Oxygen sensors, number 1. Oil pressure, coolant over temperature, oxygen sensor. So this one's a little more unique. The misfires take a little longer to show up a little further down here. So this has oxygen sensor, oil pressure sensors, etc., causing us issues on that. So I thought that's kind of interesting. If you go from engine to engine, and even I think maybe even package to package. Let me just see here real quick. I just want to see. So this is 42,748. So if I change this to like the police interceptor, police responder, down to 41,000 repairs, right? So it filters it down even more with that. So even across the different trim levels, we can get down into that as well. So kind of interesting with that. All right, that's the F-150. Let's go to the Escape, which is going to be a whole different can of worms. Now, as far as scanner stuff, since they share a couple different engines, or at least the technology, it's going to be a lot of similar functional tests. So evap tests, relative compression, and injector flow tests. So those are the ones that are the automated tests. The car is going to walk you through how to do it. I can tell what cylinder's contributing. Compression issues, injector flow issues. There's that misfire monitor neutral profile correction again, power balance test. Like I said, they're going to share a lot of similar tests and functions just because, you know, Ford uses a lot of the same systems across the board. Go to body control module. That's going to give me the same type of thing, you know, tire pressure monitors. battery monitor system. A lot of the things you would find in the F-150 you'll find in the Escape, because they share a lot of systems. But as far as SureTrack information, though, let's see. Okay, so we can see number 5. Also, by the way, a lot more repairs on these. 275,266 repairs on the Thule. That's a lot. So you can also kind of tell how often they might break when you're trying to maybe buy a new vehicle. You can look it up and see how often they break and what the common failures are. Number 5, evap purge solenoid valve. And that bears out over here in the codes 4,000 times the P1450, which doesn't give us a description here, but if we click into it, we can see that the description of this is 1450, unable to bleed up fuel tank vacuum. So that is with the evap. It's an evap issue with that. And it's a capless fuel tank. Fuel filler neck on that. So that's kind of interesting that that's the number 1 code by far. That is the number 1 code, is evap there. And then we have evap again, all the way down. A few misfires thrown in there for good measure, as usual. Wheel bearings, that seems a little high, but if we have wheel bearing problems on it, that'll cause an issue. Let's go up here again, change my engine. Let's go to the 1.6. 286,000 repairs. Turbocharger on that. Coolant bypass valve. There's that 1450 again. Misfire, coolant level, turbocharger, supercharger. Coolant leaks, pretty high. Pads, rotors. Transmission assembly. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, all the way down to wheel bearings way down there, but transmission assembly is way up on that. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of transmission failures. And then we'll go to the 2.5 liter, the Duratec. A lot of evap issues on that. Because evap generally is to the platform, less to the engine, more to the actual frame and body. Pads, rotors, AC. Suspension stabilizer bar, that seems absurdly high. Evap purge solenoid. So you can see where a lot of the common problems are. And you'll see it's kind of sticks into one neighborhood as to what the actual issues are. So let's go to focus and see what we can see there. So that's going to be same basic engine stuff, right? Injector flow, compression. There's that PMI though, programmable module installation. So if I do have to do anything with the engine, ECM, stuff like that, I do need to do PMI, which is going to verify the VIN. And then I have to do some key switches. You can read data or write data. So I'm going to start with reading data. It's going to make sure the old module is still installed so I can read the data out of it. Hit yes, turn the ignition switch, and then it saves it. And then after you do the repair, replace the module, do whatever else you need to do, you would want to write the data into the new module. So you can go in here, install the new module first, turn the ignition on. And then I've done this a few times on this same vehicle, so it's in there a couple times. So here's the one from today. It's going to write the module information. This takes a few seconds. It doesn't take very long. It's a simple copy and paste. Give it a second. Even on the demo vehicle, it does it. There we go. All done. Cycle the ignition key. PCM module configuration is complete. All right, so that's PMI. And available on certain Fords. F-Series, most of them. Focus and the Mustang Mach-E is on there. All right, and then also in Scanner, we have the body control module, which that has the wiper motor module calibration. That's where you have to bring the wipers up manually to 50 millimeters from the edge, and then it's going to automatically set it for us as to what the range of travel is. All right, and last, let's go into SureTrack here and see if we got a few different things. So the 2 liter, one of the 2 liters, this one has the most repairs by far, 340,000 repairs on this. There's that 1450 again, another evap issue there. A couple of lean issues, fuel rail system pressures on these. Engine doesn't start. 1450 even over here on the top search lookups. So a lot of evap issues on those. Let's go to the electric vehicles. I don't think there's going to be a lot of data. Yeah, 674 repairs. Brake switch, steering wheel position, wheels and batteries, taillight bulbs, things like that. So didn't figure we'd get a ton on that. Let's see, engine 1 liter, little 3-cylinder. Once again, 1450 evap problem, turbocharger, misfire, cylinder 3 misfire, oxygen sensors, crankcase ventilation system, oxygen sensor, turbocharger, spark plug, right? So you can see all these different common issues with that. Let's go to, I think this is the one I had already. Yeah, 341,000 repairs. Let's go to the other 2 liter. 21,000 repairs. So that is the ST, Focus ST. Once again, evap issues. Like I said, evap's going to be a lot to the platform. So it's not necessarily going to be engine specific, but you see it does change a little bit. There's those sway bar links again. Turbocharger, valve stem, spark plugs, a lot of different. And then we'll go to the last engine there, 2.3. That's in the RS, so even less because that's fewer vehicles out there as an RS. 2600, lean condition, evap, and then now we're down and getting to the single occurrences. So not the most common vehicle, not the most common engine. But we can see the different repairs. And like I said, even on your own vehicle, you have access to this. If you have a up-to-date scan tool, you get a code for 6 months of access, and you can go in there and you can actually see this stuff. So hopefully you took away a few nuggets on Ford and how that might hopefully that might help you the next time a Ford comes in. If you haven't seen one before, you can kind of know where to look, know where to go. A couple specific tests that'll help you with that as well. So let's talk about next week. Next week, we are going to be talking more about security link. That is a hot topic lately for sure, with vehicle security, vehicle, what do I want to say? Vehicle, yeah, secure gateway modules, things of that nature, being able to access secured functions. Ford is actually a vehicle that has secured functions on it as well, 18 and newer. Just you don't really need to do anything except for have up-to-date software on it. We'll talk all about it. We may have Nissan by then too. I hear it's imminent, very, very close. So hopefully by next Tuesday. If not, then oh well, I guess we missed the boat on that one. But we'll definitely talk about it and how to add it, because it's gonna be any day now. They assure me it's any day now. Just made the video for it, so it'll be happening soon. So all about security link next week. If you want to join in, it will be whatever the current situation is. It's not going to be a total rehash of the last time we did it. If there is up to date, more current information, it will be added in there. So anytime I do this particular topic, it's always going to be whatever the most current situation is. So tune in 6 and 9 Eastern as usual every Tuesday. Snapon.com/OT to join on Zoom. Otherwise, 6 p.m. goes to YouTube, youtube.com/Snapon Diagnostics. And then the 9 p.m. Eastern goes to my Facebook page, facebook.com/SnaponJason. Go give me a follow over there. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you like and subscribe. It helps with that algorithm stuff, so that'd be helpful. Also, if you want to see any of the previous topics in this series, this is definitely not a comprehensive list because I forgot to update it. So we are up over 83 different episodes, anywhere from ADOS through the OEM-specific stuff that we are doing right now. So it's all available on YouTube, youtube.com/Snapon Diagnostics. Let's get to questions. Looks like we're a little light today. I know we were, there was a little mess up on YouTube. It timed out. So we had 2 separate entries on YouTube. So that might be why we have fewer people on there. But hey, you can always ask your question after the fact. If you're watching on Zoom and you do have a question, just hit that little Q&A button, type it in, and we'll get to those in a second. I do want to make sure that I mention my buddy Keith, who also does free training every week, Wednesday and Thursday. So Wednesdays it is on Zeus and Zeus Plus. Thursday it is on Apollo and Triton Tools, 7:30 Eastern for all of those, 6:30 Central. It's only one class a night. And that is Zoom only. So it's snapon.com/OT. So it's going to be setup functions. Let's set up your Wi-Fi. Let's talk about security link. Let's talk about Yeah, Snap-on Cloud, all that good stuff. And then he walks through code to completion, talks about all the buttons and different functions in Fast Track Intelligent Diagnostics on the tool. And then he takes about a 5-minute break, and then he comes back and talks about all the scope and meter functions on the tools as well. So it's a very thorough class, about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, depending on questions. You can get your questions answered too. So it's definitely worth your time checking that out. So let's get to questions. As I said, very light this evening, nothing on Zoom. And then as far as YouTube, it's just Nick checking in from the UK. I know we do have a fair number of people on there, but it's just a matter of, I think they got misdirected with the YouTube timeout. So I apologize for that. You can always watch the replay as well. So with that, we're done. So I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you picked up a few little tips and tricks on Ford and what makes Ford unique as far as with scan tools and fixing them. Hopefully you'll join me next week for a security link. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a nice night and take care.